This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Steve Daum of PQ Systems about the costly mistakes you want to avoid when applying SBC.
That's right. Plus a personal look at personal Kanban. That more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence. Hexagon is shaping smart change by providing the confidence to increase production speed and productivity while enhancing product quality.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for June 23rd, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. Before we go to our news story, did you mention the Emmy last week?
No.
You didn't? Okay, well, once again, for the third time, our director, Chris Smith, has won an Emmy, so congratulations.
Not for the show.
Not for the show.
Surprisingly enough, it's never for the show.
I don't know why we haven't won an Emmy. It's amazing.
It's amazing how hard it is to win an Emmy when you don't actually apply for one for the show. But
and also, we're not on television. But anyway, congratulations to Chris Smith for his third Emmy for every 15 minutes. All right. ASME and other organizations have endorsed the STEM Opportunities Act of 2017, a piece of legislation that would increase engagement of women and minorities in the STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math, otherwise known as STEM, in STEM careers. The bill was recently introduced by House Science, Space, and Technology Committee ranking member, Texas Democrat Eddie Bernice Johnson. Johnson said in introducing the bill, the need for full engagement in STEM by women and underrepresented minorities goes beyond enabling individuals to fulfill their dreams of becoming a scientist. Our economic future relies on what we do now to nurture the STEM talent that will be necessary to meet the demands of an increasingly technological and knowledge-based economy. So what's she talking about? Well, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that STEM employment, we talk about this a lot, STEM employment in the science, technology, engineering, and math sector is the fastest growing sector, with computer science and engineering jobs among the fastest growing STEM occupation. Now, we discuss STEM education a lot on this show, and it is clear to us through our conversations with people in industry, and obviously the industry that we work in, there is a lot of technology in it, so we're kind of on that end of it to begin with. But they're telling us that we need to bolster STEM education, and this bill would help to do that. However, everything has a price tag, and many programs that support STEM education are already on the chopping block in the president's current budget proposal. STEM programs originating from NASA, Department of Energy, Department of Education, NOAA, that's the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, all of those have STEM education programs that will be impacted by the current budget proposal. That isn't a good thing. On the upside, however, back in February, it was covered by the press pretty prominently. The president did sign a couple of bills back in February, including something called the INSPIRE bill, that stands for Inspiring the Next Space Pioneers and Innovators and Explorers, which was in support of STEM education for women. That's a good thing. However, usual political thing, on left hand you've got, and this isn't just President Trump, this happens in every administration.
Sure.
On the one hand, hey, look what we're doing over here. On the other hand, they're slashing budget on stuff that counts. And in my opinion, everything everywhere rests on education. And if we want to, make America great again and support manufacturing and bring jobs home and keep people working in manufacturing, jobs which are more and more science, technology, engineering, and math related, we need to support science and math education. If we don't do that, anything we do in the short term is going to be a short-term gain. If we're not building up people who have the technical skills to go into the workforce, we're going to be messing ourselves up in the long run. That's my opinion anyway.
I agree with you. It's a challenge because remember now, really, you mentioned short term versus long term. I mean, in order for this to really work, and in order for STEM education to do what we want it to do in terms of filling jobs that maybe don't even exist yet, it's really more about the basis of STEM. It's not really specifics to the jobs that are available. So it goes back to critical thinking skills. But what happens is industry many times says, well, we need welders, we need this, we need that, and let's go out and get them. That is fine in the short term, and that may create some jobs. But long term, and I just got back from Hexagon Live, learning about what the factory of the future is going to be about, and looking at the changes that are happening in things like simulation, virtual reality. I mean, there's so many things that are based on science, but it's almost more in the realm of science fiction right now. So you need to be aspirational in terms of the training you give these young people, so that in 2050, 2060, they'll be able to do those jobs that are going to be available, in the coming decades. It's hard to do. It's a moving target. So, but again, I think the basis of STEM is good to give people that underpinning to be able to adjust to the jobs of tomorrow as they come along. And if we want to support manufacturing long term, that's really where it's at.
That's what you have to do.
No doubt. All right, thanks, Dirk. All right, well, it's clear that managing teams and maximizing results is important keys to organizational success. A recent article from INSEE, the Online International Business School, offers some clues as to how compensation factors into this equation. How your bonus affects your colleagues' behavior is the name of the piece, and it appeared in Wednesday's issue, you see right there, of the Quality Digest newsletter. Well, that's why we try not to have people know what everybody makes. It's a problem. But this is really interesting what they did here in this piece. I'm going to get into it here in a minute. The authors of the article, Phanish, Puranam, and Sunkee Lee, both of INSEE, recently completed a paper looking at this very question, and the results were really very surprising, to say the least. Their paper described a natural experiment comparing compensation schemes at a South Korean e-commerce enterprise. They refer to it as kind of like a Groupon-like company, which is important because you have to understand that teams of salespeople need to reel in partnerships. That's really the lifeblood of the company is those partnerships. So sales work is really what that company is all about. Very, very important, and how they motivate salespeople are important in their success. So as it so happens, this company was in the midst of a transition in how they handled compensation during the time of Puranam and Lee's study. Up until then, all salespeople were paid by performance, commission-based salespeople, which is normal for many companies. However, the company was slowly transitioning the individuals on their sales teams to fixed salaries. The change was made in alphabetical order, which represented the randomness necessary for the natural experiment to work. I mean, that's what a natural experiment is. You don't kind of create those parameters. They exist, and you say, "Ooh, this is a great experiment, which we can run naturally in the real world."
And it just so happened this company was going through this transition, so they were able to. And the fact that they were rolling it out alphabetically
enabled the randomness. To is a perfect natural experiment. And again, looking at to see how the two basic types of compensation models would affect collaboration within the workplace. Really interesting psychological experiment here. And one of the really interesting insights from this experiment was that social effects have a powerful effect on human behaviors, even more than rewards such as money. As the authors write, I want to quote from this right here: "Removing rewards pegged to individual performance appears to have freed employees to engage in joint production behavior. As more and more employees were switched to fixed salary, the social effects exerted an irresistible pull on the pay for performance sales staff. Despite still being subject to the old system, they jumped on the collaboration bandwagon." Now, I added the italics there because I found that rather incredible. The financial rewards of the old system were pulling the salespeople to think of themselves at the expense of the team, right? But the power of the social system was such that they still began collaborating more even before they were on the new fixed salary system. Really interesting that there's this element of social collaboration going on in the company, slowly spreading as people begin to profit from working together, really more than individually. So. Some people were transitioning to that. Others still were basically getting commission based on how many deals they themselves could make.
But they still ended up working together.
But even the ones that were still profiting more from doing their own commission, making their own sales, began to collaborate. How can I help you? Maybe that deal is better for you. We should work together on that one, that kind of stuff. Really interesting, the social don't want to say pressures, but I guess it's a good word.
Yeah.
The pressures of the social system was such that it overcame their desire for money.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Well, I mean, this goes back to the idea that the strongest type of motivation is inherent motivation, right? I mean, money is a much less powerful force, yet management by reward and its counter, management by threat, is really as prevalent now as it ever was. So this kind of turns that on its head a little bit. In other words, yes, you can manage by reward, you can manage by threat, many people do it, but this is saying, well, when you have inherent motivation of a social system where people can work together and feel good about helping each other out, and the company grows through that works.
Yeah.
People do want to, in some way they want to do that, even though they want the money too. They want to be part of that social system, maybe even more strongly than just the money.
Yeah, interesting.
Really fascinating social experiment.
Yeah. I think we lose track a lot that people inherently want to, like you said, they inherently want to work together.
Yes.
I think, or most people, not all people.
Many do.
People
yes.
generally like the social aspect, and when you set it up where, the original way, the merit pay, you kind of are pitting people against each
Very
other,
much so.
and which is maybe good for your pocket, depending on how good a salesperson you are, but you're isolating yourself, which probably isn't good.
But think about what else it does. It creates mentorships where now your whole team, I mean, in any sales team, you have 50 salespeople. I mean, obviously, some are going to be really, really good, and some are going to be not as good. Some are new, some are experienced. So when you create it so that it's not just these silos of money, silos of reward, of the way it mostly is in these systems, when you say, well, we're going to spread that out so all of you are going to succeed or fail together, well, then all of a sudden you say, well, hey, are you struggling with that? This is what I do when I encounter a customer that I can't satisfy or a difficult problem. This is what I do. And that mentorship helps spread the wealth around and make the company organization better all together.
Yeah, good stuff.
Interesting experiment. So check that one out. Really interesting social natural experiment there from InSeed.
Yep. Okay, well, we cover statistics quite a bit in our editorial coverage in Quality Digest Daily and on our website. And we have several notable authors who write for us. Don Wheeler, Dr. Don Wheeler comes to mind, for instance. But we don't talk about statistics much on this show because we don't want to look like idiots.
Two out of two hosts of Quality Digest Live don't know enough about statistics.
That's right.
That's
but
100%.
Fortunately, we know people who are smarter than us, which is
almost
probably
everybody.
the majority of our audience. Yeah. Okay. Well, today we are joined by Steve Daum, Director of Development for PQ Systems and author of the article 5 Costly Mistakes Applying SPC, which discusses some of the common errors people make when using SPC. So Steve is joining us today via Skype. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Dirk. Hello, Mike.
Hey, that was a nice article, by the way. Even Mike and I understood it. So good stuff. Well, and one thing that jumped out at me was something that one of our authors, I mentioned him earlier, Don Wheeler, often rants about, and that is that people often try to calculate things like, let's say, CPK and other metrics before they have a stable process. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is the problem there that he's referring to, and you alluded to in your article as well?
Sure. Thanks, Dirk. Well, CPK is an important metric in conversations between suppliers and customers. So it can become a key metric when talking about quality levels. And because of this, it can take on an elevated importance for a supplier wanting to meet the needs of their customers and keep them happy. However, CPK, or a capability analysis, it's just one tool of many in what Don Wheeler calls the SPC way of thinking. And part of that way of thinking is knowing that a process needs to be stable and predictable before you do a capability study or calculate CPK. So an employee who's not fully versed in this SPC way of thinking, and they may have the best of intentions, could respond to a customer by reporting capability before establishing that the process is in control. Another scenario where we've seen this come up relates to the use of these highly automated precision machines. The machines perform really well. And we've seen cases where one operator may monitor 6 or 8 machines in a bank of machines. Over time, confidence builds up that these machines always stay in control. And the problem is that they do, just up until they don't. And so in this case, it might seem reasonable to skip the control chart and the study of the process and the stability and just calculate the CPK because the machines run so well. This is an example where the SPC way of thinking, which is more along the lines of continuous improvement, can really help.
Well, Steve, one of the questions that we get asked a lot by readers is how many points do you need to start creating a control chart? You mentioned in your article that people often insist on waiting until they have enough data before they try to create a control chart. So what's wrong with that?
Well, there's not really anything wrong with it. It's just that some processes and some products don't really provide as many opportunities to measure as others. So think about some highly specialized piece that maybe is only produced once every few months. And next, think about the guidance you see in some of the SPC publications that say, you need 25 data points to get a reasonable control chart. Well, in some cases, that could take a long time. So the guidance here is that more data is always better, but sometimes less data can still provide benefits. A good analogy is exercise. At one point, I didn't do any exercise for years. Just walking around the block once in a while would have been better, although still not the ideal case. It's the same way with SPC. Practicing the way of thinking, the SPC way of thinking, even when you don't have enough data, is better than ignoring the data and waiting until you do. So, I think people just need to be a little bit flexible about these dogmatic rules about how much data you need before you can benefit from thinking about it and studying it and thinking about the variation.
Now, does that mean that you could have, I don't know, you could start off with 5 or 6 points of data and still get something from that?
Well, if the data are in a time series and they're from the same process, there is benefit to looking at fewer points. Obviously, a control chart with one data point on it is not going to be very interesting or provide much insight. But once you get 5 or 6 data points, you can start to pay attention to the variation, the mean, and how much spread you're starting to see. Now, you want to be careful about the conclusions you draw, but you don't just want to set the metric aside and not look at it during that time.
Because you could be missing out on some useful information that you could get in the short term, even if you don't have enough data then. Yeah. Your company, PQ Systems, is obviously a software company that sells SPC software, right? So one complaint that we often hear from statisticians is that too many people just take some data, like we're just talking about, they just take that data and they plug those numbers into their SPC software and it spits out a chart and okay, everything's under control. Easy, right? Are they right?
Well, there's more to it than that. And let me give you a story. I went up and interviewed a supplier quality engineer at one of the big automotive firms. And one of my questions to him was, what do you look for on a typical visit when you audit one of the suppliers? And he said that, well, generally he keeps an eye out for suppliers who are faking it. And I said, well, what do you mean and how do you tell? And he said, well, some things just look too good to be true. And he also mentioned that some suppliers are masters at checking all the boxes. We have our quality improvement manual. We've trained all of our employees. We've all been to SPC classes, check, check, check. So they've checked all the boxes. But something our founder, Dr. Mike Cleary, was fond of saying is that change is really hard work. And if you take the continuous improvement mindset, which is part of this SPC way of thinking, we're always involved in change. So it follows that we're always involved in hard work. And so what this auditor was basically saying was that you can kind of tell if people are really engaged in changing things and trying to make improvements versus just trying to check the boxes off that will help them get through, the next month's worth of production. So whether it's using SPC or doing appropriate training, continuous improvement is hard. And using SPC software alone is not going to solve the problem. It's also not going to improve your quality. Things like understanding variation and understanding the continuous improvement mindset and then creating a team that's willing to work hard on these over the long run. Those are kind of the things that we look for on firms that are really making an effort and really seeing gains in quality improvement over time.
Okay, well, thanks Steve, for that and for joining us this morning. And also, Steve is going to be presenting a webinar with us next week titled 5 Costly Mistakes to Avoid When Applying SBC. Right. The webinar happens on Thursday, June 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and you can register via the link in Steve's article. There's also a link underneath the player page. You should see it down there. Or just keep an eye on your email inbox for further details coming up early next week. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All right, see you next week.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we'll see you on Thursday. We've done a couple of webinars with Steve and with PQ Systems, and they've always been really entertaining.
Steve's really good. Yep.
Steve's really good
and
presenter.
I think Matt Savage of
Matt Savage
is also joining us.
Yep. And really good folks, and they look at it from a high level. So I mean, you're going to get a lot of information about statistical analysis and SBC in that webinar, so check it out. All right, well, the issue of the Quality Digest newsletter that we put out on the 4th day of every working week is lovingly known by us here internally as the Thursday Sift. It presents contributed articles that are top picks from our editors as well as you, our readers, and also offers up a weekly op-ed from one of us on the QD team on a topic of social currency and or personal interest. We've all written them. You know, we like writing them, even though they're sometimes they're a little bit of a chore to actually do them. But when we write them, we're happy we did them, and you're obviously happy that we did them too because they're very well read. Well, this week's op-ed came from QD editor Laurel Thoennes, who is a devotee of Kanban. Her article describing her take on personal Kanban, titled, "What Do You Mean My Production is Wonky?" was the top article in last Thursday's issue of Quality Digest, and it remains one of the most well-read pieces on our site over the last week. Well done, Laurel. That was really, really great. A lot of people read it, got some comments as well. Well, for any of you who don't know, Kanban is a highly effective system for tracking and limiting work in progress, or WIP. It's visual organization at its finest, helping the user see work as it needs to be done, and also as it's progressing and also as it's completed. You kind of see it go through the board as you have it. People use little cards or little colored pieces of paper, and they move it along, and you just basically at a glance can see where you're at.
Nice little visual tool.
Very good visual tool for organization, and not just in work, as we're going to get to. Personal Kanban Personal Kanban is a program that has been developed in recent years by Jim Barry and Tony-Ann Barry. Jim Benson, I'm sorry, did I say Jim Barry?
Yeah.
Jim Benson. Well, Jim Benson and Tony-Ann Demaria Barry are the team at the consultancy Modus Cooperandi, Jim and Tony-Ann. It takes the Kanban principles of visuality and flow and demonstrates that the system works equally well at home as it does in the workplace, which is really great. Again, because you think about it, work is work. Whether you're doing it at work, whether you're doing it at home, I mean, you want to have your projects, whether it's, take the dog to the groomer, take the kid to the soccer game,
go shopping,
take the dog to the soccer game, take the kid to the groomer, whatever it may be. You can do it at work, you can do it at home, right?
Watch reruns of West Wing.
That's great too. Well, it's here that Laurel offers some terrific advice and insights. Now, it hardly bears repeating, I think, that we're all busy these days. We're busy at work, we're busy at home, and if we don't want to collectively lose our collective minds, we need strategies to order our multiple tasks. Multitasking and continual interruptions don't work. We know that. So what are some better ways? Well, firstly, you can use the Kanban board to kind of find your sweet spot within the pace of your work. When you find yourself with lots of things in the doing column, you need to slow down in taking on new projects until you clear some of that WIP over to done. When you have few or no things in your backlog of projects that you need to begin, you should really actively seek out new tasks, perhaps from your coworker or maybe even from your spouse. Say, honey,
ask for more.
What can I do?
So.
Can I help you out?
I don't think so.
She probably would say no.
Oh yeah,
I'm perfectly fine with everything.
Nothing needs to be done.
Like my wife, no, I need no help from you.
Can you paint the house?
Last time I gave you a project, it totally got messed up, and my dad had to come over and fix it.
Can we tear out the driveway?
Sure,
this
honey.
Morning?
See, Kanban is fun.
It's
fun. Well, Laurel's article also passes along the wisdom that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it.
There we go.
Perfect example. Every time you choose to begin a project, for instance, you're removing some bandwidth to take on something else, perhaps something that you don't even yet know that you want or need to be doing. So be careful in the work that you undertake. Finally, prioritize. That's a really important one. How you choose to rank the tasks you want to take on, it's entirely up to you, but there are some general rules that make sense, I think. Work that involves others but relies on you to complete something first should always receive a high priority. That makes perfect sense. Tasks that are easy or fun or showy should not necessarily be priorities unless they also, of course, add a lot of actual or at least potential value. The context of projects is really important too. I mean, where are you in your organization in terms of timing? I mean, do you need something to meet, say, a quarterly deadline maybe? I mean, how about financial value? Will certain projects make or save money in the short or long term? All these things are really important factors to consider when you're prioritizing your work. Well, as you can see, like all great organizational structures, Kanban is much more about questions and answers. The system is intended to get you thinking about where you're going and why, and the value streams that such projects represent for stakeholders both in and out of your enterprise. It's a really terrifically efficient way to visualize work, and if I might say so, Laurel's article is a terrifically entertaining and enlightening approach to the topic. So give it a read and give it a comment. Laurel's really good about answering reader comments.
Yes, she is, yes.
She really likes to engage with our readers. So yeah, send her a comment on the article if you liked it. Many of you liked it. We got a lot of reads on that piece. Got some comments, but send us some more, and Laurel will get back to you with her feedback. She's a real, I don't want to say an expert, because expert is a loaded term, but she's really a devotee of Kanban. She talks about Kanban a lot and really understands it.
I mean, we all feel like we have to be organized at work.
Yeah.
And we kind of, a lot of times, throw it out the window when we got home. We got Post-it notes all, we got some in the fridge, I got some sitting on the counter, I got some in my, and they're not organized in any way, and if you get to do stuff, I mean, especially, if you own your own home or something like that, there's always lots of tasks to be done, and stuff slips unless you somehow can get some sort of system in place to, like you said, prioritize and keep track of what you're doing.
Well, you hit on the right term, the visualization. Visuality, we talk about it a lot here, and she mentions Gwendolyn Galsworth in her piece too, who is a real expert, a true expert in visuality. And visuality is a strong thing. I mean, it enables you to, it's almost like, I always compare it to Feng Shui. Feng Shui can seem like an airy-fairy thing, but I mean, Feng Shui is all about having your mind be calmed by seeing the flow of your physical space. To me, Kanban is a lot like that. I mean, you're calmed by having a visual scheme of your work in progress.
I finished this. There's something satisfying about knowing, okay, this is everything I've got on my plate.
Yeah, and she talks about kind of some of the emotional reactions that you have to having work be done. Some of the chemical reactions you have to completing tasks. I mean, these are strong motivators. We talk about inherent motivation. These are strong motivators to get you going and get you finished in your work. So it's great stuff there by Laurel. So check that one out.
Check that one out. Okay, so before we end today, at the top of the show, we talked, my first article actually talked about STEM education and how important it is. And I think, my question to you is this. Are we putting too much importance on it? And are we minimizing the importance of, let's say, more, liberal arts education, arts, whether it's art or acting or music or, reading, whatever, right? Do you think we need a shift from, let's say, liberal arts to science and technology, or do we need to keep that and incorporate STEM into it? So I guess what I'm really asking is there value in liberal arts in conjunction with, let's say, the STEM stuff when it comes to moving into the workplace?
Boy, that's a big question for 2 minutes, Dirk. But
I'll give you 3.
Well, this is my take on it. I mean, as a person who had a liberal arts education and has learned mostly through this job for the last decade or more, critical thinking skills are critical thinking skills. And I think that anything that you do within a university environment, secondary school environment, trade school, whatever it may be, is going to teach you beyond what you get out of high school in terms of applying critical thinking to a problem or a project. Certainly I studied a lot of English literature, I studied a lot of American history, I studied some sociology, I studied stuff that's in the humanities. I learned from that, I think, how to express myself, how to ask questions, how to follow up on questions and get to the information that I need to have. I mean, it's helped me as a journalist. It's helped me as a journalist in the engineering space too, because even though I don't have an engineering background, a STEM background, I learned enough through that background to get the information that I need that I can make actionable. So I think it doesn't almost matter. I think many times there's a certain pressure on kids when they're getting into college, let's say, to say, well, you got to study STEM. You need a good grounding in STEM. Well, I mean, for me, that wouldn't have worked. I probably wouldn't have graduated because I don't know that I would have got through that course load. I don't think that my brain was attuned. I guess I probably could have done it, but I don't think my brain was attuned to a lot of the math and the science stuff. I needed to study English, Lit, and history, stuff that I could resonate better with. And I learned a lot through that again, and I learned how to come out with critical thinking skills, I think, that enabled me to, I don't want to say succeed, but to be able to function in the world regardless of what I did with it.
And that's interesting because that's actually, there was an article in, New York Times, it was actually a couple years ago, that almost took that same approach, is the exclusion of liberal arts and the kind of the critical thinking skills and so forth that you get from studying even history and
sure,
how does it work and how do
why do things happen?
Why do things happen? Is at least as important as as the technical stuff. Even if you're not going to take a liberal arts track, and even if you're going to become an engineer, right, still that knowledge that you've gained from that liberal arts, this author was saying, ties into and bolsters, I guess would be the term he might use, bolsters or enhances the STEM education aspect of it.
I think it does. I mean, I think that, again, the brain is the brain. The brain is going to be a sponge to absorb whatever is presented with, and you can have different elements that you bring into that create an adult person that has a ability to think in the world. But I think that my point is that you don't want to force a certain mode on somebody. I mean, I think you want to let kids, especially, find that themselves. I mean, my pushback to it would be, for instance, if people had said to me, hey, you've got some ability to reason, you should really study engineering, and I would have said, well, maybe. I mean, I would have done it if I had to. It was the only thing available. But I mean, it was better for me to not do that. I learned more easily through not doing that. I mean, I did take a little bit of science. I did take a little bit of math when I was at Rutgers, but I didn't get great grades, but I got some grounding in that stuff too. But certainly for what I do for a living, it was more important for me to write and read and learn in that way. Everybody's different. I just think that the one size fits all, to me, is where you fall down. And that's what you don't want to do. So
okay, all right, thanks.
That's your answer. Well, I'll get one for you next week, Dirk.
Right.
We do that every week or off script. We've been enjoying those, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've done about half and half so far.
Yeah.
Have you been liking
Oh
those?
yeah, no, I catch you completely off guard. You got to make up stuff.
Yeah, like that. I mean,
just completely lie.
Whatever. All right. Thanks, Dirk. All right. Well, that's our show for the week. But before we go, we want to thank our sponsor. Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence is proud to announce the first product in their enhanced productivity line, that's EPS, the Global S Coordinate Measuring Machine. By combining smart technologies through hardware, software, and user experience modifications, the Global S focuses on superior measurement performance and increased productivity. Developed to execute high throughput measurement routines, the Global S provides detailed, traceable results and helps reduce operator workload. It also combines both speed and accuracy to offer the fastest tactile scanning performance for a CMM in its class. So to learn more about the Global S, please visit online at www.hexagonmi.com/globals, that's globals, or click on the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right. And thanks as well to Steve Daum of PQ Systems for joining us on the show. As a reminder, next week Steve is presenting an information-packed webinar that you don't want to miss. 5 costly mistakes to avoid when applying 5 costly mistakes applying SBC and how to avoid them.
That's
Sorry
right.
about that. Thursday, June 29th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And you can register via the link in Steve's article, or there's also a link underneath the player page down there. Or keep an eye open in your email inbox for further details coming up early next week. That's it.
That's right. Check that one out. All right. Well, thanks all for joining us. Have a great, cool weekend. If you're not in the Southwest, hopefully it'll be cooler than it is here, 108 or whatever. So you guys all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.